So we want to talk about Montessori today, and we want to talk about how that's different from the traditional approach. So for me, my whole journey with Montessori was, of course, I am always looking for, a program that will allow kids to be autonomous, to be
Right.
self-driven. Because what I've always seen in classrooms is that there is a teacher, and when the teacher tries to control everything, when the teacher tries to drive the entire learning, not everyone is engaged, right? So like, and especially with the younger kids,
Right.
so there though it's so difficult for them to be engaged, to be focused on something. And then when one person is trying to grab everyone's attention, and one person is trying to sort of deliver the learning or drive the learning for all the kids, it like really doesn't work. So you like, and again, what I do in these situations is sort of, fly on the wall, like in the from the corner of a classroom. If you're looking at what's happening, you can see that like most kids are not actually paying attention only to the teacher, something else only going on. So for me, it was like, no, if there's 15 kids in a classroom, what is the philosophy which can be engaging for each and every one of them?
Right.
I mean, for the older kids, we have a very different sort of program and philosophy. But for the younger kids, basically, yeah, like through sort of all my research and stuff like that, this was really the only idea where there was a promise that, okay, it can be self-driven,
Right.
it can be driven by the child. And yeah, like for me, the first time I entered a Montessori classroom, like it was just absolutely magical. So because I could see that, there were these 2-year-olds, there were these 3-year-olds, they were all busy doing things, they were all, learning completely by themselves,
Right.
and they were all so focused and so engaged, which is so difficult to imagine. Like if you imagine 15 like 2-year-olds and 3-year-olds in a room, like the picture that's going to come in your mind, it's so difficult to imagine all of them being focused and all of them being engaged. But that's exactly what I saw in a Montessori classroom, right? So that's when I was really sold. I was like, Montessori has figured something out here. They've figured out this amazing thing, like, like putting 15 people in a room itself at any age can be a challenge,
Right.
for them to all be working, to all be engaged. But Montessori has figured that out for even 1, 2, and 3-year-olds,
Right.
So that's what for me was so exciting, about Montessori. So now, if I ask you, Radhika, like, what is the difference between, a Montessori preschool and a typical or a traditional preschool? You know, like, so let's start with this. Like, what does a traditional preschool look like? What is the teaching methodology, or, what is the methodology in a typical early childhood preschool?
In a traditional preschool environment, once the child enters, or let's say few children enter,
Yeah,
you have them all sort of together.
right.
And most of the preschools have themes that they work around. All right.
Okay,
So suppose the theme now is transport. So all your activities are around transport for some period of time.
right.
Where we are introducing them to probably water transport, road transport. So 15 of them have
Yeah,
to engage with transport, discussions of transport, or maybe some art and craft related to transport
right.
um, around a theme. But
Yeah.
what's important is not the theme. The important is all 15, if they're 15, have to be engaged in that activity at that moment, and it's led by an adult.
Right.
And all 15 are of a similar age group also, right? Like if
Sure.
you have 1.5 to 2, everyone in that group would be a 1.5 to 2 year old, or a
Right.
2 to 2.5, 2 to 3, whatever. So
Sure.
that's something you'll typically see. Again, some would engage, some would not engage, some would just want to be by themselves. That's something, a common setting, what you see across even in a middle school or a primary school, you'll see that in early years also. Now
Right.
you go to a Montessori environment.
Yeah. Well, actually, so let me ask
Yeah.
you a couple more questions there. So, like, I'm genuinely curious. So, in a typical preschool, how much of it is teacher driven still, would you say?
99%. I want to
Okay.
give that 1% as benefit of
Right.
doubt.
So it's,
Because
yeah.
that's how. So one thing is like the idea is we have to engage the learners. We have to do activities to keep them busy,
Right.
to entertain them, and there needs to be an output that has to be showcased so that parents know it's worthwhile sending the child to the preschool. I think we
Sure.
are in that cycle.
Right, got it. And basically, it being teacher driven means, I guess, pretty much you are doing whatever the teacher is telling you, or the teacher is always trying to either teach you something or get you to do something very specific.
True. Like, okay, this is the artwork that we are all going to do. We're all going to color the aeroplane today.
Right,
The child can pick any color of his or her choice. Maybe there could be crayon or pencil. I'm guessing we've reached there in
right.
schools.
Yeah,
But everyone would color that aeroplane
Yeah.
at that particular time. And I think it's also a natural tendency. Oh, is it going out? That's something we do generally.
right,
And if a child doesn't want to do, I mean, at least in my years of experience, I've seen that we've sort of held their hand and
right.
made them do also because, yeah, everyone does it, sort of.
Sure. Okay.
Yeah.
So basically, everyone has to do the same thing at the same time,
Yes.
in the same way,
Yes,
more or less.
more or less in a similar way. Like we're doing cutting activity, like the teacher would prepare 15 sheets of probably striped paper, and everyone will have a scissor. Everyone has to cut at that time, and yeah,
Right.
it could go the way they are cutting, but we are cutting together.
Right. Yeah.
That activity is cutting. I mean, this time is for cutting. That sort of
Right.
stuff.
Yeah.
Whether I want to cut or no is not a consideration. We're all planning to cut. sort of.
Right.
Yeah.
And then what happens to the kids that don't really want to do it at that time?
So, because they are really young,
Yeah.
we try holding their hands and sort of luring him into, do you want to try this? All that happens.
Right.
I don't think we really force them to cut. Because
Sure.
that won't work with that age group. Definitely won't work.
Right.
I'm saying we might hold their hands and do it and then just, okay, not done, sort of.
Right. And then I guess in that situation, then kids would start acting out, right?
course.
I mean, yeah.
You'll see them walking out, being in different spaces, distracted, trying. That's very normal.
Right. Yeah. Yeah. Okay. And now,
Like movement is
Yeah.
so integral part of that age group, right? Like
Okay.
having them to be at one place itself is too much of an expectation.
right. Sure. Okay. So now, we were talking about a environment which is 99% teacher driven, as you mentioned, a typical traditional preschool. And now, how is Montessori different from that?
So in Montessori, the belief is like the environment is the teacher, the third teacher.
Right.
So if you see any Montessori environment, the classroom has laid down activities,
Right.
and it's sequential. Sequential in the sense the child can sort of graduate from one to the next. So there is a particular order in the environment, but
Okay.
it's not told that you got to do this, this. It's very intrinsic, the order. So
Right.
there is a sense of order which also develops in the child when they finish one activity. And once a child enter, the child can sort of work with any material, engage with any material.
And this whole thing about the environment to me now, like, I mean, I have a 1.5-year-old daughter, and there it's becoming so interesting to see that basically for them, the environment is always a teacher, or like
Yes.
what I see her doing, it's almost like if you leave, the wrong things, it's a problem, right? Because they are just constantly exploring their environment.
Absolutely.
They are always just grabbing things and, exploring things with their hands, moving around and exploring. That's such a
Right.
natural instinct.
Yeah, so completely sensorial, the way
Right.
they learn, and movement. So movement and sensory, input. That's how they are learning and developing and making sense of the world
Right.
at this age.
Right.
Right.
So conceptually, this sounds really interesting to me because it's like, okay, that is the natural instinct that these at this age anyway children have. Now we put them in an environment where, rather than it being like your phone and your, water and like things that maybe you don't want them to
Engage with,
engage with,
yeah.
we have all these materials which when you engage with them, you automatically sort of start learning, right?
True. So even materials are like, there are materials which takes care of self-care, sort of
Yeah.
like you would have materials for grooming there. Then you would have something like a frame where they are learning to just zip.
Right.
Right, then they'll engage with their own clothes, then they
Right.
learn buttoning. So there are
Sure.
different materials which engage. Then you'll have some for just their pincer grip, like their
Right.
motor, fine motor. They're just pegging, putting it back. You might see them just doing that. But
Right.
once that develops, they graduate into holding a pencil or a crayon, where we are like, oh, they're writing, they're read, that sort of stuff, right?
Right.
So there are these areas which sort of it's purposefully designed in such a way that, okay, now it's care of the environment, where they're learning just to water a plant.
Right.
This is sort of self-care. This is for the fine motor skills.
Right.
Then there are also times when we have a book there, and then, two children would just want to engage. Then a teacher could just sort of read. That could be a small pair activity or a group activity as well. So not
Sure.
necessary that every activity is only individual.
Right.
You might have a small group coming together also.
Sure.
And because it's a mixed age group,
Right.
they're always wanting to do what an older
Right.
child is doing. And for the older child, it's like, oh, I'm the leader.
Yeah.
They're looking up to me. So there's so much of interaction and development happening there.
Sure. Okay. And now tell me this, what does the first day, or like how do the first few days of this program look like? So we have an entire environment. There is materials everywhere.
Right.
And we have a new child sort of coming in.
Right.
Now, how does the process begin?
So when they come in, if everything is there,
Yeah.
it's chaos, right?
Right.
I'm going to be like, tuck, 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 taking
Right.
all of it. And so there are some materials which are kept open.
Yeah. Okay.
Some which are like, we'll slowly sort of uncover it sort of for
Sure.
them. And once we know that they have settled, so initial things would be like just regular puzzles. They'll figure it on their own, how they have to plug it in or pull it out and all of that. Then maths for them to open and
Right.
sort of sit down. And then the adult can be just modeling it. The adult can be just sitting and working. Then they'll come and engage with you, and then they'll start doing that.
Okay.
Yeah. And of course, weaning off is a process here where they're going to be off their caretaker mother. They've never been off, and they're moving to a new environment from home. So
Right.
that also takes time. So it could be
Sure.
just walk sometimes, where we start with, and just actually observing and not having a conversation, so that the child trusts you are
Right.
a safe person for me to engage with. So
Sure.
being in the same space. So there are multiple ways in which it starts. So
Sure.
it's not that day one, come, let's do an activity. It never starts that way.
Right. And okay, day one, you have prepared certain stimulus
Yeah.
or certain materials for them to engage in. Now, how does it actually happen? Like, do we have to sort of tell them, okay, what is this? How does it work?
Not really. So
Okay.
some of the materials which are kept there, so like cups and spoons and all they've seen at home, they're fed, right?
Right.
So there's a lot of familiar, so we call it practical life activities.
Okay.
These are materials that they see at home. So
Right.
there is a connect.
Sure.
They know what to do with a spoon.
Right.
They know what to do with a rolling pin.
Right.
They know. So all of that is very natural. So they'll come and you'll see them directly engaging with them
Sure.
if they want to explore the environment sort of.
Right.
You just need to get started with that, and then naturally, slowly, once they build that, a rapport with the adult, which will take some time,
Right.
then you start introducing them to, okay, this next, we can try this, that sort of stuff. So there are familiar things in the environment which they'll engage with without even as adult being in the space.
Right. Sure.
So that's how it starts.
Right. Yeah. And so, like, even what stuff I've observed, for me, one of the things was almost that as a teacher in Montessori, you are following the child, right?
Absolutely.
You are practically, very less of your energy is spent in like actually telling the child what to do. It's more that, you're sort of following the child, and, the child is sort of leading the way and exploring things, and you're sort of there. So what would you say is the role of a teacher in a Montessori program?
Right. So when we see that the child has outgrown a particular activity,
Yeah.
or we see them like comfortably settling down with a similar activity, and we've had that conversations with them, then we'll nudge them to try. We call it presentation. So with the Montessori material, the adult actually presents the material to the child.
Right.
With this age group, we'll do work with the material together with the child. With 3 to 6, we present. Here, we'll do it together. So then we like, okay, should we try this together? That sort of. So that's the role. And
Okay.
most important role is observing the child
Okay.
and making records of
Okay.
what the child is engaging with, how the child is engaging with, who the child is engaging with. So there is a lot of observation. We actually, when we go for observation, when I did the program, also we like a fly in the wall. They can't make out there's an adult in the room, sort of.
Sure.
But the adult's role is to actually observe and make notes, make records. And so when we see the child the next day or after a week or something, we know, okay, this is an area where you see them regularly working with. This
Right.
area we don't see them exploring.
Okay.
Should we try that? That sort of.
Sure.
Then maybe we also see a child is constantly following another child. So that
Right.
child is a role model for this child, or we know that. So we sort of navigate a group activity or a pair activity with those two children together. So
Right.
that brings about a lot more conversations and inputs. So all of that happens.
Sure. Wow. Okay. Cool. So, Bhumi, I guess now you have been working in Montessori for how long?
A year.
Okay. So, obviously, you've been practicing it, every day. So, what would you say your role is like?
I think I would like to add to what Radhika was telling earlier that the traditional preschools where they have these themes and there's a lot of visible material that they
Right.
get to see. But Montessori in itself helps you figure out see the invisibles.
Okay.
That's what we're working on over here.
Okay.
When you look at the materials, they might look like these are practical life materials. It's like pouring or transferring grains from one bowl to the other. These are pretty much the daily chores that we might do in our real life as well.
Right.
But it's also more about where these daily chores actually help the child build that confidence,
Sure.
build that independence, where the
Right.
child figures out that, or a toddler, where the toddler has this moment where did the button by himself and he says, I did it.
Right.
So that's what Montessori to me is about,
Sure.
working on the invisibles
Sure.
through practical activities.
Sure. Why are they called
yeah.
invisibles, by the way?
I would say invisibles in the sense that independence or building that confidence in the child. It's something that you cannot see. It's something that is not an output that a parent can see.
Like my
Sure.
child can read
Yeah.
3-letter words.
Right.
Visible.
Yeah.
Got it. Got
My
it.
child is independent. So you
Yeah.
have to feel it experience it through the activities. He's able to walk straight.
Right.
He's not toppling a glass of water when he is walking. There's
Sure.
so many small things. That's why.
Yeah, it's difficult to make a report card
Yes.
out of that. That's I guess that's what it
Yeah,
is.
difficult to
Very
make a report card.
interesting. Sure.
3-letter word, okay, double L word, double O words, tick, 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 right?
Right. Yeah.
Let's say the first day that they come in to the Montessori space, or how that would look like if I had to talk about. So it's for me, building that trust with them.
Okay.
Knowing that this is their safe space. That this adult is going to be constantly there for you at this time. But even just having that safe space and then going and exploring the unknown things, or maybe the things that are uncomfortable at the beginning. And that's something that Montessori materials as well do, because I've seen children, I've seen toddlers who come and pick up the same activity every day.
Right.
And once they're done with that activity, they will then go on to exploring another activity. It's
Sure.
this activity is something which regulates that child. It's something which calms the child down in a way. Okay. And now that I've got that safe space, now that I'm comfortable, okay, now I can go and explore the unknown. I can go and explore the other things that maybe, we would like the child to learn.
Sure.
So that's something that Montessori is for me, wherein the child gets that choice or that
Sure.
freedom to be able to select what they want to do
Right.
and when they're ready to do it.
Right.
More about the adult stepping behind and letting the child figure things out,
Right.
and then the child will get that feeling that I did this, I did
Right.
it by myself.
Right.
And getting that feeling at such an early age sort of builds a foundation for the future as well,
Sure.
wherein I figured this out earlier. I solved this problem by myself. So,
Right.
I can, if in the future some thing comes up wherein, they might have that confidence in them that, I can do it.
Right.
I've done it previously, so I know I can do it.
Right. Absolutely. Yeah. And now tell me so in, the time that you spend in a Montessori environment, how much of that like if you can put a percentage to it, like how much of it is teaching?
I don't really think it's teaching at all.
Okay.
It's more about observing, being there for that child,
Right.
and it's also like one child at a time
Sure.
is what Montessori is also about.
Okay.
Like
Okay.
I'm there with this child, and then I go to this other child, and then sit with that child and see where the child is at, and then navigate that journey for the child going ahead. So I wouldn't say it's more of teaching, it's more of being there with the child right at the level where they are
Right.
and figuring out their world
Sure.
with them. So it's
Right.
like if the child trusts you, starts trusting you, is comfortable with you, then they will show you their world.
Right.
So building that with the child, and then everything is figure outable.
Sure. Sure.
And I think
I'll
that's
add
what
on here
Montessori
a
is.
bit.
Yeah.
So, like when you asked about teaching, for example,
Right.
if we want our child to read
Yeah.
the letters of the alphabet and recognize and then put it together. So the teaching bit, what happens is like if I know that this child is showing interest with the letters,
Right.
which there is a material for it. We call it sandpaper letters.
Right.
We just sit with the child and the child uses the finger because there's textures made of sandpaper, right? So they
Right.
trace the letters.
Right.
And then he'll be like, okay, this is a, this is a. So he tells you that I know the sounds.
Okay.
Once he showcase, and then there are like all the 26 letters, but he's showcasing about 7, 8. We know that, okay.
Right.
Then you sort of introduce him, okay, let's try putting the letters together and see what magic happens, right?
Okay.
So then I would be like, okay, I'll put pictures of like all at words or whatever, whatever we
Right.
learn. Then he'll list, okay, he'll put cat, mat, bat, all those pictures would be there. And then he'll get this movable alphabet box. That's the material.
Right.
And then you're like, oh, it's a cat. So then I'll bring us C.
Okay.
He just has to pick up these letters, right? Even so,
Right.
you pick up and then you try and build words.
Sure.
Then slowly they graduate into making phrases. Initially, it could be matching pictures with phrases that are already typed and kept there.
Okay.
And later, it could be them making those phrases.
Right.
And then meanwhile, they're doing so much of these practical life activities and drawing and all of that. Their grip is quite strong. You'll see them naturally bringing pencil and then putting it in the notebook. So traditionally, it's not like, oh, I've taught them A, E, I, O, U, and then they are learning a CAT, cat. They might just start writing sentences because
Sure.
they've sort of figured it in their head. Oh, it's all about sounds coming together. That's a word, and every
Right.
word has a meaning. So
Right.
that's some teaching that we do, is where we sort of engage with them,
Correct.
try to put sounds together with them so that they
Okay.
see. Then when they use those bead material for numeracy, where they see, oh, 1,000. So we exaggerate, 1,000. So just for them in the mind to know, oh, units is just one golden bead.
Right.
10 is a string of 10 beads.
Yeah.
And you have 100. So they sort of conceptualize this in their head.
Right.
And then they're like, okay, you get me 3,000, then they'll bring you 3 blocks. You get
Right.
me 400, they'll get you. So they're sort of working so much with their hands.
Right.
So they're learning operations through that. So that's the teaching that we do in Montessori.
Sure.
Yeah.
I mean, yeah, doesn't sound like teaching at all.
Yeah. So how
Yeah,
you want to
exactly.
define that? So it's
That's
working
very
with the,
interesting. Yeah.
like so maybe if she is 3-year-old and she's doing like just recognizing, okay, 6 is 6 pegs.
Yeah.
There might be another child who's already doing 6,000
Right.
because the child is already engaging with the material. That sort of
Sure. Sure. Wow. Yeah.
It's like teaching is an experience.
yes.
For the child here, if you have to say that way.
Sure.
Like the child is experiencing doing that activity, like if it's the movable alphabets or something, the child is really doing it, not
Right.
like we're tracing the A 100 times or like on it.
I think the learning by doing is
do-
so
yeah.
there.
Right.
Everything is by doing. There is-
Right. Yeah. Yeah. And why I say it doesn't look like teaching to me is that, yeah, I mean, if I ask for help from someone who knows more than me, I wouldn't call that teaching, that they're just helping me out.
Yeah.
Right? Because the moment you say teaching, again, the thing in your head is like, okay, someone has an agenda to make you learn something.
Yeah.
And they are trying to impose or execute their agenda, So, yeah, very interesting. Yeah. And yeah, almost sounds like, all this academic stuff is all happening in the same way. I mean, you're just
Everything, yeah,
exploring the
absolutely.
environment, you're just, doing activities, whatever interests you. And through that, I guess you're learning
way more, and conceptually also, and like that age concrete things makes more sense than abstract things, so they move from concrete to abstract also, right? So
Right.
these are hardcore material, they're feeling it. They are seeing a cone is a 3D which is this way, so they feel it, they put it. So even in the material the progression is like, okay, 3D to sort of 2D, so it's all concrete to abstract, that sort of.
Sure. Okay. Five
So there are
areas.
5 areas in a 3 to 6 environment, which we focus on, which is practical life, sensorial, you have language, you have numeracy, and you have culture. Culture is about our environment, everything like your history, geography, science. You talk about festivals, you want to talk about values, anything, everything can be covered in culture, right? It could be
Okay.
through picture cards, it could be through a movie, it could be any activity that's engaging with the child.
Okay.
That's an option. And then we also have language and math has a proper progression.
Actually, so let's talk a bit more about culture. Are these materials something that like Montessori has made or
There are some which are made by the Montessori, and you can customize some in a, like if you want to learn about land forms and water form, you actually have these materials there where the child can pour the water to see, oh, this is a bay, this is a creek. So similarly for in botany, they have these leaf shapes, sizes, all of that. So there are some materials, but we can develop it further. We want to talk about a local language, local food, festival. All that can be taken care of in the domain of
right?
culture.
And but it through that same methodology of there being
Yes.
materials that you can explore
Engage
at
with.
your own
Yes,
time.
yes, yes.
Very interesting.
And it could be some in culture could be just actually cooking as a domain, right? Like they don't have a
Right.
domain called cooking, but you would have activities for kids to engage. Even a toddler,
Yeah.
we would want them to sort of, like there is apple, there are oranges, there are kiwis. It might be a fruit salad for them, so they learn how to chop. They might leave it there. Some might want to eat an apple, that's okay. Some might want to eat an orange, that's also okay. But it's also like, oh, I have chopped and left it there for someone to,
Right.
have it. So there is a small space where they are cooking in their own, pot.
Sure. And so one of the things that I found very fascinating was, I mean, I just sort of realized that, okay, when it comes to language learning, you know, what you mentioned, that some might think about it, some might first learn the alphabets
Yes.
and then come up with words. Some might look at words, you know, first.
Some
you
might
know.
just start reading and
Okay.
then go back to decoding it.
Oh, wow.
Because it's very sight. Like it's
Okay.
like these are signs and symbols which I'm decoding, right? And then I'll try and put meaning to those sort of.
Right.
So yeah.
So it's like, and I can imagine that there's like 100 different ways to learn a language, and each child will have their own
Own
approach
way.
to
Yeah,
it.
yeah.
And I guess this is really the only program where it's possible to have so many different ways to approach
Absolutely.
language
Yes.
learning. Okay. And then you spoke about maths.
Math.
So yeah, there we already discussed sort of, okay, you have beads and like the numbers and thousands and hundreds.
Yeah, like to begin with, they have these number rods, we call it. Okay. So it's like, okay, so a child is picking up a rod. So it's like, okay, one, picking up another rod, which is two. So for them, two in the mind, it's like, oh, it's longer. Three, it's longer. Four is longer than two. So it's sensorially, they are sort of absorbing it.
Right.
Then they have these, it's color coded, we call it number rods. So there's a red and there's a blue. Then they learn to count, okay, one, two. Then they put the numbers to it. So they're associating, okay, this four means it looks like this. So let me put this four to it. Then adding values. So there's a proper progression planned depending on the readiness of the child.
Right. And then you mentioned how they even learn like multiplication and division.
Yes, they
So
do.
How does that?
So when we are using these, we call it golden bead material. With that, they learn, okay, addition is putting together. So you get me 5,000, they'll bring you 5 cubes. Then you get me 4,000. So here again, I'll work with 3-4 kids together. You get me 2,000.
Right.
Now when we put them together, how many thousands do we make, right?
Right.
So then we also, with division also, now this is what I have. I want to give you, I want to give you, I want to give you. How much are you going to take? And then, so we start conceptually. Then they go to actually like how you do a 16 divided by 2. They'll go to that abstract division also. But
Right.
first they'll engage with materials.
Okay. Interesting.
And then it's strange, right? Like when we learn division, like in a traditional way, you're like, okay, let's learn with 8 divided by 2 is equal to 4. Here, they're actually engaging with 1,000. They're learning the concepts of division with the materials. Oh, I can even divide 10,000. Then
Right.
I'll figure, okay, what is an 8 divided by 2 sort of,
Oh wow.
Yeah.
Sure.
So the
Sure.
whole idea that division means I'm distributing it
Right.
equally and they're engaging with the materials and you're taking so much, you're taking so much, you're taking so much, that sort of stuff. And then putting it
Sure.
in paper.
Wow. Very interesting. So we covered culture, language.
Numeracy, language, then you have practical life activities, EPL. That's where we start because it's familiar to what they see at home. They've seen
Right.
people mopping. So that's where environmental care, self care, then things what you need to develop your fine motor skill, all those what you engage at home also you're familiar with. So those are practical life activities. And then you have sensorial, another domain. You're learning, oh, this is louder, this is softer for sound, then texture, taste, developing. You have different materials to develop. You gives you different sensorial stimulus and
Okay. And so we spoke about the initial few days, right? Now, Bhumi, tell me, in an established environment, uh, what does that look like? Okay, so it's like the session has started. What does it look like? What are all the kids doing? And what are you doing?
Okay. So once the kids are settled and they've started trusting the space a lot more as an adult also, it's the mindset that we go in the space is like we're not trying to control that environment, or we're not trying to teach them how to do this. We're following their lead.
Right.
So the child tells you when they're ready to write, or the
Okay.
child shows you when they're ready to do a certain activity. So how it would look like once they're a little bit more settled would also be like, there are learners who are individually doing activities by themselves, but at the same time, there are these observations that we are making wherein, we think that this kid functions better at this time, after maybe he's eaten. Okay, he is able to do a lot more. Or the moment he comes in, if, he's able to explore new things. And
Right.
towards the end of the day, he wants something more comfortable.
Sure.
So, it's one child at a time, wherein you are observing those things along with the child and moving along in that journey with the child.
Right. Okay.
so when we have, suppose I have 6 learners
Yeah.
coming in,
Right.
and we would have probably 16-month-old, 18-month-old, 2-year-old,
Yeah.
because it's a mixed age group environment.
Right.
You definitely see, like I told you, when we have familiar things, you might see some engaging with a puzzle
Right.
directly, taking it, they'll go take it, they'll start working with it or play with it. Work
Sure.
is play, right?
Right.
That happens. Then, so you will see them spread out in the environment.
Right.
Some would want to go and play. There'll definitely be gross motor activities there, which is like
Okay.
maybe climbing a slide or something. So some would directly engage with that.
Okay.
There will also be an environment where they can rest in the space. Some would just directly go and rest.
Yeah.
So they are spread out. So you see who is ready to engage in a conversation with you. Sort of you
Okay.
observe.
Okay.
Okay. That's your first child to
Okay.
go with. Okay?
Okay.
Who wants to give you an eye contact, who wants
Right.
to work with you, who wants to at least engage with you.
Sure.
Once you start with someone, you'll see the herd slowly coming in.
Interesting.
They might also want to talk to you, might want to do something that you're doing with them.
Right.
Slowly you get started.
Sure.
Yeah. So, and then initially it would be activities where multiple people can do it. For example, if I'm doing rolling a mat,
Yeah.
I know there are 5 mats and all 5 can engage with a mat. So initially as an adult, I will also start off with things which everyone can sort of do it simultaneously
Right.
and then get them to do these individual activities.
Sure. Okay. So
So-
you mentioned
Yeah.
that, you look out and then, there is a child that's kind of, looking to engage with you.
Right.
Now, what is your approach? How do you actually engage with that child?
So if I see the child is working with something, then it's straight up with the work.
Okay.
If he's just ready to have a conversation, we don't even know how much of them are ready to speak, how much of
Right.
them are still using signs to sort of communicate. So
Sure.
all that, is developing.
Right.
So then you sort of slowly have those movements, hand eye, then you sort of look with them, engage with them, like want to go for a walk. So small thing where we are just establishing a relationship.
Sure.
Like, okay, I'm there for you, sort of,
Okay.
So that one could become 2 or 3, or
Right.
it could be just one-on-one also.
Sure.
Yeah.
Sure. Okay. And so, Bhumi, if you were to describe what you are doing in a typical session, so you mentioned making observations, and then how are you going about engaging with the kids?
So it's if I have to say it in a sentence, it's like it's less about rushing and more about being present,
Okay,
like with the child,
right.
being present with them where they are, and it
So I'm trying to figure out what you mean by that. So being present means okay, the child is doing something, and you just want to sort of, I guess, be a part of their journey and something like that, and not have your own agendas. Or is that what you're trying to say? Or how? Yeah.
yes,
What does being
it's
present mean?
over my years of like over this the time that I worked with children, the one thing that I've realized is that they always know. They'll
Okay.
always tell you the way they want to be treated. They'll always tell you how and what they want to do right now. Maybe they're not able to communicate it in the right way, and it might come out as tantrums sometimes, but they always know what they
Okay.
want to do. It's sort of like you just need to be there for them, like while they are exploring this journey.
Okay.
So that like they know that I have this safety net while I can
Okay.
go and explore
Right.
things with me.
Okay.
So it's actually a Montessori. I feel is a lot of a mindset for adults as well.
Okay.
Like slowing down, being there with the child, not rushing the child, letting them
Right.
explore, figure things out, and not like having that urge to just go and teach them how to do that.
Sure.
You know,
So I feel
yeah.
like what you're saying almost is that you go in there not with your own agenda, you just are present for the child to get help achieving their agenda.
Yes,
Yes.
Yeah?
absolutely.
Okay.
It's like we're not their storyteller. Like we're not telling them things, or we're not asking them to do things. It's like we're more of like story keepers. Like we're keepers of their world, of their stories, of their secrets. We're holding that process for them while they are
Okay.
exploring or while they are figuring it out.
Sure. Wow. Nice. Okay. And one thing I want to talk about is freedom, right? And so, because, like, obviously, freedom, autonomy have been very important to all of us because that's what's sorely missing in the education system. Uh, and but I'll tell you what I saw. Like one of my first few Montessori experiences, I think there were like kids working, and then like there were these two kids. They just like, I don't know what happened, but they just started hugging each other. And nobody said anything. And there's someone who's just playing, right? And nobody said anything. So what's the policy on this? Are the kids free to engage with other kids, talk to other kids, play, as you mentioned, sleep? Are they free to do any of this at any time?
So every environment has ground rules,
Okay.
which is sort of discussed with the children,
Okay.
and they absorb it over a period of time.
Okay.
Safety being the priority, right? Like you
Sure.
can't be sort of harming yourself, harming your friends, harming the environment. That's sort of ingrained. Now, when we're
Right.
looking at toddlers, we're
Yeah.
not going to be telling them don't go and hit, because they're not going to register what you're saying, sort of,
Right.
right? But like you said, yes, they can rest when they want to rest.
Okay.
All right. But if we see that, okay, it's a practice that you come and just rest and go back home,
Yeah.
we'll intervene.
Okay.
Then we'll get you, we'll see, we observe, we'll see what's going on, how long is
Right.
that going on, sort of,
Right.
And children don't generally end up just resting and
Yeah.
going back home. But if they want to sort of engage in a conversation with another child, they are absolutely allowed to do it. Allowed means they can do it.
Yeah.
That conversation would be way more meaningful, or they might be discussing work actually, like we do
Right.
at office. No one
Yeah.
comes and tells us, oh, you got to talk to your colleague, right?
Yeah.
So I don't know why we do that to the child.
Right.
But there are these probably ground rule, like volume levels have to be that it can't be disturbing someone who's working besides you.
Sure.
So all that, and you'll see people generally whispering or having lower volume levels. So it's sort of in the environment. That's why when you go to a Montessori space, you see even 35 children can be there in the same space, but they'll all be working, and
Right.
it will be absolutely okay, not absolutely silent, but silent enough.
Sure.
So these are sort of ground rules which they absorb.
Right.
Yeah, you don't have to like, oh, everyone have to keep quiet now. That's
Yeah.
never sort of
Right.
enforced, but it's practiced.
Sure. And say, if a child is sort of just wants to play.
Yeah.
So how does it work? They can just go and play.
Not like we have children who first come into the environment and their first attraction is to go and play,
Right.
while you have another 14 of them who will be at work.
Sure.
You will go and engage in a conversation with the child. They might throw a tantrum saying, no, I want to play.
Right.
So we know how much we can push and how much we can't, right?
Sure.
If we think that now the child is all about playing,
Right.
we do back off.
Sure.
But we've seen that they will come back to you and work.
Right.
Because everyone else is engaging in work.
Sure.
You will see them picking up something and working.
Right.
There are scenarios where they would never come and do the work also. So you might go back to them again and have a conversation. Keep trying to have a conversation, but also letting them, okay, do you want to do this and come back to this sort of.
Right. Sure. But what I meant was not, in the moment, right?
Okay.
Like, okay, a child is doing a bunch of activities, gets a bit bored or something, and okay, just wants to go on
Yeah.
the slide.
Absolutely.
That's fine.
That's absolutely okay.
Yeah. Okay.
Absolutely okay. They can.
It's sort of like the child is showing that I need this right now.
Right.
And unless that need is not met,
Yeah.
no matter how much we get the child to do something else, he's not going to do it.
Right.
Or he or she is
Sure.
not going to do it because right now that's not what the child needs.
Right.
The child needs a little bit of movement, or the child needs to go on the slide, or shake it off. Maybe
Right.
that work has been heavy for him, and he or she needs to have that.
So they might need that few minutes to just switch off, have fun, come back to work.
Right. And how does Montessori deal with play? Like, is that a part of the program, or how?
Actually, explicitly, they talk about gross motor development. They don't
Okay.
focus a lot on like play, free play as much. But it's a mixed age group environment, and you'll
Right.
see a lot of activities are led by the older kids for the younger ones
Okay.
in the environment. So there will be sand, again, a very sensorial, heavy exploration which they love at that age group. There'll be water to play with.
Right.
That's the play they engage with.
Okay.
Real plants.
Okay. And this is like, these are actual materials which are part
yeah, I
of.
mean a
Okay.
sand pit maybe, or a tub of sand. Then you'll have a lot of mirror. They love watching themselves in the mirror, and
Right.
that's play.
Okay.
Like
And
workers play. That's what it is. Yeah.
Sure. And so these materials are part of like Montessori?
Yeah,
like
they're part of the
mirrors and like
environment.
sand and like
Yes,
things like
yes,
that?
yes.
Okay. So if you want, you can just go and.
Absolutely.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
Like lot of emphasis on gross motor development.
Right.
Because like these children might be crawling and some are just learning to walk, and there are multiple stages they come in.
Right.
Then they have this, like I know in a 3-year-old environment, we have this circle which we just tape a red tape. So just learning to walk in a circle.
Okay.
Then walk on a straight line. Then you'll have a little raised surface whether they're able to balance themselves on a height. So you have all these stuff in the environment. They might bring it, lay it. 4 of them will have a party with that, go back, that's also work for them. We call
Right.
like ABCD as work. No, that's work also for them.
Right.
Yeah.
Right. Wow. Really cool.
And it's so grounding for kids as well. Like even as someone who's observed Montessori for like a year, I've seen that being in that environment itself, in a way, grounds you.
Sure.
Grounds. You're able to ground your energy, or like be mindful, be more observant, slowing things down and not rushing that whole process.
Yeah, I think it also
Yeah.
just calms you down. Like that's
Sure. As a teacher.
as a child,
child.
as an
Okay.
adult, you're not constantly. So there's no pressure of constantly engaging the children
Right.
or keeping them busy with
Right.
uninteresting or boring activities. They'll figure how to keep themselves busy, sort of. Yeah.
Sure. Yeah.
There are like these outdoor activities as well where they go and like water the plants or something, and that itself is such a beautiful experience for them as
Right.
well.
Yeah. Like for me, one thing that's very important is like self-expression.
Yes.
Right. Again, because the system doesn't allow
Yeah.
much of that. So that's, when it comes to all of these sort of, okay, like being able to talk, right? Like I feel like that's such an important thing, for
Absolutely.
a little child. They might want to talk with their friend, they might want to talk with a teacher, but being able to express yourself, and that's again something that, especially at that age, we know is so important for language development.
Absolutely.
But again, in many typical environments, that is not allowed, right? That is looked down upon, that is punished. So, yeah, when it comes to Montessori, like, talking or expressing yourself, like, how is it looked at, would you say?
I mean, it's encouraged. I mean,
Okay.
because you're constantly, when it's one-on-one, you're engaging with the adult. When you're
Right.
working with another child, you're constantly engaging with peers. And no one stops you from working with another child or with an adult, or you want to be working by yourself. And even language development sometimes is all about just conversations.
Right.
There is no specific agenda of teaching language this way. Sometimes
Yeah.
it's about just having a conversation with the child. That's language development.
Right. Sure.
Sometimes it's all about just listening to someone speaking, or
Right. Sure. Sure. Superb.
Like when one child is trying to do a puzzle and he or she's not able to figure out, and this other child is just comes in and asks the child that can I help you. So like there's a lot of learning that happens there as well,
Right.
like
Sure.
sharing or caring or helping, empathy. A lot of things they learn through the environment itself.
Right. Sure. Yeah. Oh, very interesting. Yeah. I think I'm thinking we can make a list of invisibles. I learned a new phrase today.
Sure.
Yes.
That Montessori is focused on.
Yeah.
So, what do we have? We have obviously independence.
Independence, self-regulation,
Right.
then
We spoke about, I
control
guess.
of error in the materials, like
Right.
correcting yourself.
Yeah.
Then
Then,
In confidence, I think the I did it
Yeah.
moment.
yeah,
Right, I was
Yeah.
gonna say that,
solve
yeah.
your problems.
Yeah.
Problem solving. I mean, yeah. We talk about all these jargons, but these materials sort of help you develop.
right. Yeah.
But I
Yeah.
think it's a little bit of creativity as well, because like
Okay.
there's
Loads.
yeah, so like when one material, you can never imagine that you're going to use it in this way, but the child ends up just
Yeah.
finding out a completely different way of using that material. So
Sure.
Yeah, as simple as like we were doing brown chairs is
Yeah.
for the width and the length and the height.
Yeah.
The child just created a tower and used the pink tower material to just measure it. It was very fascinating to see how he was sort of using that material for a different purpose. So it's quite interesting
Right.
how they engage with the material.
And when you do something like that, I mean, that's fine, I guess.
Because it's absolutely fine. I mean,
I mean,
it
I
was
think
intriguing.
that's
Like,
the
what is he trying
philosophy
to?
of Montessori, because the materials are so open ended.
Right. Okay. Sure. Very interesting. So, yeah. And I guess, building confidence, building your independence to do things. And then we spoke about sort of learning how to interact with others.
Yes.
I guess that would be a huge thing where, again, your typical environments are not focused on that. And then, empathy, leadership.
A lot of socio-emotional learning also happens, right? Because the materials and okay, if you want to work with this material at the moment and you also want to engage with the material, they figure how two of us are going to work with the same material, sort of. So how do you resolve conflicts? All of them
Right.
happens quite through the materials, I feel.
Yeah, I was going to say something about the traditional schools and like the Montessori school, wherein if the child wants to do something, they have to go and ask the teacher.
Permission.
Right.
So permission to do that. So every time, maybe once the child grows up and a problem comes up, they're like, okay, I need to go ask my mom about this, or I need to go ask an adult about this, and then I'll be able to do it. But like Montessori helps you build that confidence that you can do it, like
Right.
by yourself. I
Right.
have that thing that I can figure it out by myself.